Hi everybody, thanks for tuning in to my do-it-yourself Moss Terrarium Workshop video. This is in lieu of my Moss Terrarium Workshop, which we had to cancel due to the coronavirus. So I appreciate all of you who have purchased one or more of my do-it-yourself workshop kits. Thanks for following along, and I hope you find this information informative and helpful. So first of all, you got your terrarium, your glass globe. I did clean it out, but just kind of make sure, just anything inside, if there's smudges or whatever, you want to clean that off before you get started. And I recommend just water and a paper towel or a micro cloth. You don't want to put any Windex in there or any chemicals. It might affect the moss. So after you do that, you kind of want to take a look at the moss that I gave you. I gave you a lot of different types. So kind of take a look. You can peel these apart. You don't have to use the size. You can bunch them together. Kind of take a look at which ones you want to use and see the size of your vessel, and just kind of determine, you know, where you want to lay everything out. And you don't have to plant it, you're just placing it on top of the soil, so they're easily moved if you don't like where you put them. The first thing I would do is go ahead and take your spray bottle. This is not in my instructions, but take your spray bottle and spray the moss, both sides, if it's dry. I like to start with them wet, and then if you look at each piece of moss, there's probably a lot of like pine needles or stray grasses. You can pick whatever you want out. If you like the look of it, you can just leave them there. So these are sustainably harvested. A lot of the moss I find, now that the snow's melted, I was able to go out and pick a bunch. I do have a reliable source that I harvest some over the winter. But in any case, most of these are from my own yard, my own neighborhood. So the first thing we're going to do is take the large pebbles. There's two different size pebbles you'll be able to see. Obviously, one's larger than the other. So the first one, we're going to lay down the larger pebbles on the bottom. Doesn't need to be a thick, you know, layering. These pebbles are to kind of catch the excess water that goes through the soil. And then we're going to put a little layer of this activated charcoal on top. And that will help also absorb some of the water and take away any of that like stagnant smell that might happen. These are open top terrariums, so there shouldn't be too much. And if you don't want to put the charcoal in, you don't need to. I just do it because it does help with the algae that kind of gets on the bottom when the water settles, and especially if you keep it in a brighter area. So we're going to go ahead and sprinkle that. You probably don't need to use all the charcoal I gave you. Just a light dusting. You can kind of see that. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to add the soil. I am just using organic potting soil. There's a little bit of perlite in there just to so it doesn't get too dense, but that's what I use. You can use, some people use succulent cactus soil in their terrariums for better drainage, but I just find this works fine. So you're just going to go ahead and dump in a little bit at a time. Move it around with your fingers, flatten it. If you want to make any hilly areas, you can, you know, put that up a little higher. So just dump it all in there, pat it kind of down with your hands. Just gently. You don't want to, you know, create a super dense layer. You don't really need a whole lot. The moss will grow on the rocks as well as the soil. So then we're going to go ahead and start to add our moss. some of the moss, you know, is naturally rounded, so you can just put that right up against, gently press it down. And like I said, I like to kind of get it moist on the bottom all around. And you want to look at the different textures. You want to create, you know, kind of a fun composition. There's different types. I think I gave you at least 3 or 4 different types of moss. And if you find you wanted to add, you can, well, we have a lot of snow right now in New Hampshire, but once the snow melts, there's lots of moss all over just any kind of wooded area. So if you're near any kind of wooded space, go right ahead and you can just scrape some up. You always want to make sure you leave some to regrow. So there's a lot of different color combinations. The reindeer moss dries up quicker. It's not really a moss that you find on the ground around here, so that's a little more decorative. But once you get the mosses in place, you also want to leave like a space that if you want to create a path or just some interesting flat spaces for sand and the smaller stones, just like a little resting area for your eyes. I've kind of done that. I don't know if you can see it, but just kind of did that right in the middle. So we're going to go ahead and use the smaller stones that I gave you, and I'm going to put those where my path is going to be. I'm just going to kind of sprinkle them down. Now, if you like the look of just these smaller stones, that's fine. Just leave those there. If you want to do an extra texture, you can use the sand that I gave you. And if you have like a small little funnel like this, you can kind of pour it in and direct it a little easier. But you can also just use a spoon, just a regular little, and just kind of sprinkle it in on top. Now the larger or smaller pebbles will prevent the sand from just like getting lost in the soil. So I'm going to just create like a straight path down the middle, and then I'm going to leave some of the smaller pebbles out. And the next thing you're going to do is take kind of your points of interest. I gave you some larger stones. You can either have those, how am I going to get this so you can see this? You can either put them in upright, you know, so they're standing, or sometimes they're fun to kind of lay down. You can move some of your moss and just have it lay down. And that's a fun way to go because sometimes the moss will kind of grow up and around it and makes for a really interesting, just another interesting texture. So go ahead and put your different layers of interest. I think I gave you, you know, some of this uncia. I think that's what you call it. And so you can add those. The great thing about these little moss terrariums is you can go ahead, if you don't like what you've done, you can go ahead and easily pick them up and move them around. Again, with the when you take a look at all around, you want to kind of make sure that it looks nice from the outside. So if you have these like kind of weird little gaps, I would go ahead and pull some more of your mosses apart and just kind of stick them in there so they look a little nicer against the glass. So you just don't have like gaps of dirt. And just go along. Make sure you're really happy with it, and you can put whatever you want you have around the house, anything that won't get kind of mildewy. I have a little Buddha guy. I think I've given everybody who's purchased a kit a little angel or a gnome or a Buddha. And you can go ahead and put them wherever you like. Mix it up. And there you have it. That's pretty simple. And then what you're going to do is just take your spray bottle, again, spray the mosses so they're nice and wet. And just keep an eye on it about, depending on the humidity in your home, probably once a week, just go ahead and spray the moss. Kind of, you know, make sure the water's getting through to the roots, and that way it'll stay alive. They do look nice when they dry as well, but the idea of the Moss Terrarium is to try to keep the moss alive. So I hope you have success, and I hope you enjoyed this. Send me a picture of your finished product and enjoy.